All right, we are live. And on today's guest, I interview internationally renowned yoga teacher, a yogi who's been practicing for more than 25 years. He's a writer, leading the way in the slow yoga revolution, advocating for more intimate, breath centered therapeutic yoga practices, seeking to change the dialogue and direction of yoga practice in the West. He's also the host of the Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast, which he's been hosting for the past near decade and has recorded almost 500 episodes now. In fall 2024, he opened the Birdhouse Yoga Center in Easton, Pennsylvania. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Jay Brown.
Thank you so much for having me, Derek. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really honored to have you on. I've had the opportunity to listen to a bunch of your episodes. I first heard you preparing for a recent guest of mine, Michelle Thielen from Yoga Faith. That's how I first heard of you. I really enjoyed the episode, listened to a few more, and then reached out to you. And I'm really glad that we connect on Welcome to the Winner Circle on my podcast, which I've been recording for 5 years now.
Well, very cool. That was a pretty special episode with Michelle, honestly. It's only recently that I've been exploring faith and belief in Jesus, and it's a somewhat taboo subject in the yoga world to discuss it. Faith in general is strangely enough, I think, for a lot of years in the yoga world, we took a lot of elements out as it kind of got mainstreamed and marketed. But in any case, that was a pretty significant episode. So interesting that that's the one that brought us together.
Yeah, and I'm excited to delve deeper into the things I've learned on that episode and the topic of Jesus, faith, yoga, religion. But first, just to get us started, I ask a few questions to every guest as we get to know them, me and the audience. And these conversations are really geared to be uplifting, inspiring, and empowering to everyone tuning in, just to move forward with greater faith and belief in themselves on their hero's journey. So the first question is a really positive one, and that is, what do you love about your personal world right now, Jay? These conversations don't focus on all the chatter and the external world. I want to focus on you. So what do you love about your personal world right now, Jay?
My personal world? Ooh, I don't know if I know what that means. Can you be more specific when you say my personal world? You mean
Yeah,
like
your life.
the life that I'm having?
The life of Jay outside of like what's going on in politics, media, et cetera,
Oh,
et cetera.
well, I mean, I feel very blessed. It's kind of lovely that you asked me that question first because I think sometimes these days I get a little bit caught up in like the hardship of things and like the financial challenges and whatnot. So to start with what's beautiful and wonderful about it is wonderful. I love that. And there are a lot of things that are wonderful about my life. I have a wife and two daughters, a 15-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old daughter. We have a home here in Easton, Pennsylvania that we've worked real hard to make our home. And, I have this little backyard that I can sit in and watch the birds. And, on so many levels, I'm incredibly blessed to just be able to do what I'm doing and be in the situation that I'm in. So, in terms of like how my life is on like a core sort of like fundamental level, like spiritual level, I couldn't be more grateful.
Thanks for sharing that. And you mentioned all the things you're doing. So just let's give a brief summary of the thing I talked about in the introduction. But how would you explain to someone what are you currently doing?
Well, right now, I mean, primarily I am a yoga teacher first. That is where it all started. And then for a lot of years, I became a blogger as well. There was like a golden time for the blogosphere when the internet first happened. And I was very active early on. So I had a somewhat well-read blog. Like before, there was really like social media and like a lot of the other kind of media outlets that we now use. Blogging was the thing. And so it started with that. And then at some point, I started the podcast, as you mentioned, coming on 10 years ago. And so I'm kind of become a podcaster as well, just from doing it. So yoga teacher and podcaster. I haven't done much writing these days, honestly. People don't read writing in the same way, and at some point I hope to return to it, but of late I haven't written much. Mostly I teach and I do podcasts. I also, over the years, sort of developed, I guess, what you would call an online platform. So I have weekly live classes that I do. And I started doing that before the pandemic. I had a friend who was a business partner of mine for a while who, at a time back in around 2015, when I was planning to close a yoga center that I had in Brooklyn for 10 years, he said to me, "You need to start live streaming your classes online." And I fought with him about that. And I said, "Oh, yoga's in person. I don't want to be an online yoga teacher." And he said, "Listen, you're going to close your yoga center, and all the people you've connected with over the years are not going to be able to connect with you. But if you do this, you can do classes from your living room anywhere, and they'll always be able to still take class with you." And he did convince me, and I did do it. So I started doing classes online before I left Brooklyn. And then I was doing them throughout from 2017 to 2019. I was on what you would call the international circuit. So there was a whole circuit of yoga teaching, going and doing workshops in different countries. And I had opportunities from doing the podcast. And all that time I was also doing online classes. And then the pandemic happened and everybody went online, but I was already set up. So I've had kind of this online platform that I've been doing my teaching on and doing the podcast. And then only about 8 or 9 months ago did I open this yoga center here in my neighborhood, because there was a day where I was like sitting in a room doing a class online, and it was almost like I pulled back and I saw myself sitting in a room with my laptop all alone. And I like kind of freaked out. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm in a Black Mirror episode." And I said, I really got to find a way to get back into the room with people. So that's what the yoga center's been about. So that may have been a long way around to your question, which is I'm a yoga teacher and a podcaster. Primarily, that's what I do these days.
Brilliant. But no, that's perfect. And it leads me into my next question that I ask all my guests. And so you wear a lot of hats. Um, with all these roles that you play, what would be your overarching personal mission that guides you in all these roles and everything that you do?
Oh gosh. Wow. I think my answer to that question has changed some pretty recently. I think that my answer now would have to be to serve God's will.
Serves God's will.
To
Okay,
serve
let's
God's
just
will, to understand what God's will is for me, and to make good on that, to just serve that, whatever that is. that's
uh,
that's my overriding purpose. And part of that is being a good husband, a good father, and part of that is trying to be like some force for good in the world through whatever else I'm doing, whether it's the podcast or my teaching.
brilliant. Well, let's get right into it then. Let's talk about God. I feel like this was a piece of the yoga puzzle that I've added in the recent years that I think is so important, and that is based upon the fifth niyama, Ishvara Pranidhana, humble surrender to a force above you, guiding you on your journey. When I brought awareness to that and attention to that last niyama and kind of placed Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit as that higher force for me, it transformed everything. What does God mean to you?
Well, I think I've had a little bit of a similar journey to you from what I just heard you say. As you mentioned in your intro, yoga has been my main thing that I've done. It's the only thing I've done most my entire adult life. And I think that, there's a lot of different ways that people translate Ishvara Pranidhana. There's a pretty wide spectrum of philosophical viewpoints within the category of yoga. You have like atheistic yogis and theistic yogis and all this in between. So I think for many years, I was aligned with what you might call like a radical non dual philosophy. And in that philosophy, there there is kind of like a sense of some grander intelligence or higher force, but it's not conceived of as like a creator or like a being that you have a relationship to in a way. And part of that is that you are God. Like there's no distinction between you and God, between you know what do they say in the yogic tradition? They talk about Atman and Brahman. Atman
Yeah.
is your soul, and Brahman would be God. And in the non-dual philosophy, there's no difference between Atman and Brahman. And I think I was of that view for a long time. And really, that change that started to happen mostly, I would say, coming out of the pandemic. My daughter, my youngest daughter, she had a mental health break where she was diagnosed formally with rapid onset OCD and generalized anxiety disorder. That's what the Western prognosis was. And, you know, I mean, I don't really even know how to describe it, but, to see my like 7-year-old daughter be in many regards now, I might even be inclined to say I think she was demon possessed. She was screaming and yelling the most horrible, vile things that you could imagine, and she was really harming herself. And we didn't know what to do. And at some point in that like worst time of my adult time as a parent, I I ran out of whatever resource I had, like whatever I thought that I had developed in my yoga practice or like in my spiritual understanding to like meet the challenges of life, like fell short in this moment. Like, and I just felt like I can't do it. Like I couldn't do it. And there was a specific moment where I literally fell to my knees and I started praying and talking to God in a way that I had never talked to God before. And and something happened in that moment, and then it didn't happen immediately, but I feel like something happened that God answered that prayer in a very profound way. And I started like even testing it and talking to God a lot more and like saying to God, hey, if this is real, like if you're real, I need you to like show me. Like, I don't know if I believe that this is real. And then like he did, you know? And so at a certain point, I just like couldn't, like I've been someone who's always said I want to know the truth, and this what felt more true to me than anything. So getting back to your question, in yoga Ishvara Pranidhana, sometimes it's translated as get down on your knees at the feet of the Lord. And I felt like that's what happened.
Hmm.
And so for me, there was a connection there. And I have been studying the Bible, I guess. I don't know if studying is the right word, but I've just been engaging with the Bible like for the last, I'd say 2 years now, more so than any yogic text, because I spent 20 years with yogic texts. And it's crazy to me how much I feel like things are misrepresented, and I really do feel like there's a spiritual battle taking place, like I talked about with Michelle, I think.
Yeah.
And I would say to the other point is that what I have come to see is that, I've often traced like through history the way yoga happened. So you can kind of see the way that yoga existed, and there's these different philosophical viewpoints and practices that came about through time. There was divine revelation that happened, and there was all kinds of horrible stuff that was happening. And then Jesus happens, you know? And that seems to me to be like where sometimes yoga doesn't go. Like they don't, it's almost like divine revelation stopped at the Bhagavad Gita or something. And I think that in a way, for me personally, thinking and understanding and engaging with a relationship with Jesus has made me understand what's happening in the world. Like it's the only thing that's actually helped it make more sense. Otherwise, it makes no sense and it feels totally like I don't know how to be in it, but something about recognizing the truth of Jesus makes a shift in your perceptual lens where you can kind of recognize what's happening or something. I don't know. I don't know how very good, but this is very new for me. This is very fresh new. I haven't even talked about this so much publicly. I'm happy to talk about it with you, but I don't always have very good words because it's very raw and new for me.
And that's okay because we're all just learning, and at the end of the day, no one knows. No one knows.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what I'm learning more. The more I know, the less I know. The more I think I know, the less I know, and that's okay. It's perfect exactly as that is.
And it's really, I gotta say, taboo in the yoga world. Like talking about it on the show definitely made some waves. I did get a lot of emails. I was kind of surprised by like how many Christian yoga teachers there are, but it's a very taboo thing in general. Like not even just among yoga teachers, like I remarked this previously, but it stands out to me that like the only time I've heard people using Jesus' name as often as a curse word when you're
Uh,
not within Christian circles. And I don't know, it's just a very, I don't know, it like I said, it's changed my perceptual lens and I see things very differently now through a lens of faith than I did
mhm.
before.
Amazing. Well, like you spent over 20 years studying like yoga philosophy, the yoga texts, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, but more recently, the Bible and Jesus' teachings. From your current understanding, what is true about Jesus? What is his truth?
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting process. I mean, first the process was, does God exist? And once I was like, yes, God definitely exists. Then, okay, well, what's my relationship to God? And understanding that, like, one, believing that Jesus was real, Jesus also existed, and that Jesus was crucified on a cross. And then the most important one would be that he was resurrected. And becoming convinced of that, I can understand Jesus as the reason why I'm able to have a personal relationship to God.
Hmm.
Like before Jesus, you couldn't you wouldn't necessarily have any way to conceive of God in the way that we do now. That way that we would be able to have a personal relationship to God because God is this omniscient formless thing. How do you have a relationship to an omniscient formless thing? How do you have a personal relationship to something that hasn't existed as a person? So, so God putting himself here as Jesus, and this is the hard part for me. Like to this day, I'm still like, am I supposed to say Jesus? Am I supposed to say Father? I don't know. I still get confused. The Trinity thing, I'm still coming to understand the whole, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit
Yeah, and that's
reality.
okay.
I'm still coming to try to understand it, but I recognize the importance of Jesus as a conduit for me to have this particular personal relationship to God, to have this direct communication with God that I don't know that I would be if Jesus hadn't come about and died for us in the way that he did.
Hmm. Why do you feel there's so much resistance to Jesus, God in the yoga world, from your perspective?
I think it's not just the yoga world. I think as I've come to, again, this is all very new to me, but we are in a world that is ruled by Satan. That it's we've been born and raised to believe in a more materialistic view. To associate belief in God or belief in Jesus with somehow being small-minded or somehow being oppressive, or you know basically we've been indoctrinated, most people, to not believe. Like
Uh-huh.
that's the whole thing, right? that's
I,
the that's what happened in the Garden of Eden. And I think yoga practice is a vehicle for people like myself who was disenchanted by like what I saw as like the hypocritical religion of my parents. I was born into like a conservative Jewish family in the 1980s. And I remember at age 16 reading some translations of these prayers that I had memorized, and saying, I don't believe this, and telling my dad that I don't believe this anymore, and I'm not going to temple again. And he said, yes, you are, because your mom believes it. My dad said, I don't believe it either, but your mom does, so you're going.
mhm.
And actually, I was okay with it because I didn't have to believe. Like, if it was just for my mom, I was kind of okay with that. But I think I rejected the religion of my parents, the Judaism that I was exposed to, and went to Eastern religion because it was more mystical and Eastern and ancient and spiritual, without what I saw as all of the baggage. Now, I would say also, even within my exploration of Christian faith, you have similar divides. You have like a much more modern, pragmatic expression of Christianity, and you have like a more Eastern mystical, like Orthodox expression of Christianity. I've had like a couple other people on my show since Michelle to kind of discuss some of that. So, I mean, I may have gotten away from your question a little bit, but I think the resistance in the yoga world has to do with people not wanting to feel like there's this idea of right or wrong. Like, people want to not have to have there be a right or wrong or good or evil. But I think there is. And I think believing that there isn't is a deception tool to keep people from understanding.
Mhm. Mhm. So now that you're a parent, you talked about how religion influenced you as a child through your mother and your dad. Um, how do you bring this up to your two daughters? Um, how do you like? I'm sure you've explained to them yoga, and they've seen it through your example growing up. Now with your newfound opening to God, into religion, how are you introducing that to them? How are you lighting the path for your daughters?
That's an interesting question. I have felt insecure about it, but what I've done is I've talked with them about it, one, and I've started praying with them. So, like we always say grace and have prayer before dinner together, which we never did in the past.
Uh-huh.
And I'm specifically using the Lord's Prayer most of the time. And my older daughter, on her own, without me really pushing her, kind of came to faith in Jesus. I think she kind of got tied, and it's crazy how what you seek out on the algorithms on TikTok. So she got real into like some Christian content creators on TikTok. So, we had like all these conversations about Jesus because she was kind of asking me questions. And I was like, I'm asking the same questions. And I have recently gone to different services. I've been to liturgy at two different Orthodox churches, and I've been to some other services at some other denominations. And I haven't found a church or a pastor that I feel called to so much. One I might return to. So I haven't really found a church community that I've brought my daughters or my family into. But to your question, I've just spoken very openly with all of them, especially my wife about it. I think my wife has shared a certain similar journey. It's not the same as mine, but I think both of us have come to see a lot of the same things, and we're just very open about that with our daughters. So I think they see me exploring it, and hopefully that sets some example. And at some point, I hope to find more of a community to bring them into, maybe as well. But for now, I'm just exploring myself and sharing it with them as best I can.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for sharing with me and the people listening in. I really appreciate it, especially since this is new to you.
Mm.
Um, but I think it's just all about just doing our best, and we learn as we go. And for me, following that Niyama Ishvara Pranidhana and just giving it up to something above me has really helped me on my journey. And who knows what that evolves to, but as yoga teaches me, it's all about the now. So what will happen in the future will happen in the future. In the now, I choose just to humbly surrender. And that doesn't mean just leave it all up to God and don't do anything. It's that balance between action and inaction and
Mm.
having that faith, and not worrying about what other people think, or just following my own heart and seeing where that leads.
Yeah, I think for me it also has to do with like just how you position yourself. Like if there's no God, then there's nothing beyond bigger than you, you
Yeah.
know. But if there is, then you're not at the top,
Hmm.
and there's a humble place that you come from when you don't see yourself as the top. And I do think that's what Ishvara Pranidhana is about. That
Uh-huh.
surrender that you're talking about is that you don't position yourself as the most powerful, you know?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And it's also helped me understand and see that everything in the external world, everything in my personal world is happening for me, the good and the bad. Um, and just having faith in that, having faith that whatever horrible things or whatever great things, it's happening for me and not being attached to it. Another thing I learned from yoga is the non-attachment to those things. So
Mhm.
just observing it and all right, let's ride this wave. And but it's happening for me. This wave is here for my betterment if I choose that. And so adding that peace that God has gifted me with this grace or this horrible thing. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
So back to yoga.
Yeah.
Um, what do you feel is going right with yoga right now, but also what is going wrong? You could tackle whichever one you want first.
I mean, I don't. It's funny. I don't think it is for me to judge right or wrong in
Yeah,
other
yeah.
people. As just, you know, in respect to what we were just saying about where I position myself, I can speak to what I have observed see happen. I know that when I first got to yoga in the early 90s, it was a very countercultural move. It was a place for someone like me to explore spirituality in a more free way. And it was about that. People were making trips to India and coming back. Pretty soon, though, it did get what I always call mainstreamed, and it started to get monetized and become big business. And then you had yoga celebrities that came about, and like big endorsement deals, you know, Nike commercials with people doing yoga and stuff. And at that time, that's when I was sort of advocating for like sticking to the roots of yoga. And I came up with the slogan, gentle is the new advanced, and kind of was this person advocating, as you read in my bio, for this like slower, simpler practice because everything had begun so pumped up and become so much about fitness. And certainly, I would say a lot of the more mystical or devotional elements also got put away. Like fitness sells much better than, like subtle inquiries into the nature of your existence or belief in higher power. And a lot of places were really trying to like take all the religious aspects out of yoga. I remember when people were like bringing yoga into the elementary schools, or even not even that, even just regular classes. A lot of people I know stopped doing chanting or anything that might seem a little bit different than like what you would have at the gym. I myself have always held very true to doing chanting, and I still do some chanting to this day, because I do think it's about singing the name of God, and there is a devotional quality to that. I didn't always see it as such, but I will say that since the pandemic, there's been a huge contraction in the yoga world. So things are really different now than they were 5, 6 years ago. And you don't have the same yoga celebrity in big business. That's what's happening. It's a pretty tough going, like a lot of other fields, like musicians and journalists and like other art modalities that have gotten kind of killed by the internet and whatnot. I think that's happened some for yoga teachers, especially with all of the yoga going online. But right now, in terms of what I think is going right, is there are a lot of people out there who are very sincere at wanting to be good and help others, and I think that they're doing that. There's a lot of really great yoga classes that are happening, of all stripes, of people really coming together in an analog way, not just a digital way, but in an interpersonal way, and to help each other, be well and find their way in life. And I think that's a really good thing about yoga. I really do think it's a space for a lot of people who wouldn't find their way to faith. I wouldn't have found my way to the faith that I just shared with you if it hadn't been for yoga. So I do think it does a lot of things good. In terms of things that are happening that I don't know about, like right now in terms of what's working in the industry, is what they're calling like a boutique fitness model. So it's a lot harder to have just like a straight yoga center. You have like Pilates and bar and yoga, and like people want like all these different options and stuff. So in terms of the industry of yoga, it's definitely moving in a direction that's less about like one-to-one teachers and students working together, and a little bit more about this boutique fitness thing. And I'm not sure that's such a great thing, at least not for me. For me, I'm interested in what happens when people come together with like a clear and shared intention around wanting to like be well. And I've seen some pretty magical things happen over the years just in that context. And so I'm holding true to that, even though the fitness thing is really doing much better in terms of like a business standpoint.
Uh-huh. I just think anything where people are moving and breathing together, or even just if they're doing it online, just moving and breathing in unison, I think that plants seeds. And who knows where those seeds will sprout, but I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, the way I've come to understand it is I think we're living in a time where people are quite disjointed. Like our attention is all over the place.
Uh-huh.
And we live in this thing they call the attention economy, right? Where people's attention are really being hijacked by these devices. So yoga is almost like an intervention of sorts to that. I see like by developing the ability to direct your attention and be in your body and with yourself, that's like a necessary thing in order for you to experience prayer or self-reflection or all these other like contemplative aspects that you might want to have in your life, that I think we need to have in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
You need like a means for that. And so I think sometimes people had church communities and they had like rites of passage in their cultures and things that were baked in that most of us don't have now. So yoga is a way for people to bring themselves to the kind of the basic stuff that needs to be in place for people to come to spiritual understanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I also think, like for me personally, yoga is has been and still is a huge tool for awakening awareness. And
Hmm.
once that awareness is awoken, it's on us. And now we can wield the most powerful of tools, choice, and steer our ship in the direction we choose. But until that awareness is cultivated and brought to our forefront, then we're just kind of fluttering around in the wind at other people's, based on other people's programming, whether those other people be media, religion, education, our parents, culture. But yoga has given me a felt sense of awareness in real time, in that is not only felt physically, but felt mentally, emotionally, spiritually, felt in all the ways. And with that awoken, now now I could steer my ship a little bit clearer, as per my choosing.
I like that phrasing a lot, steering your ship. I think that's right. I always say you get to have some say about what's going on, where your mind is going. Like the ship metaphor would say, like, you can't control the wind, but you
Yeah.
can at least control the oar that's pointing your ship in whatever direction it's going, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting for a talk with a religion, right? Maybe God is that wind, but we do have free will.
Yeah.
Like the Bible says, we do have free will. So yeah, isn't that interesting, right?
I think it is.
Speaking of the influences of social media, and I listened to one of your podcasts recently where you're talking about AI's influence in your daughter, Rosalind, your 15-year-old daughter's life. Um, this is probably pretty concerning for you as a father, to see how social media and AI is tremendously influencing our younger generations, but everyone, to be honest, is it not?
It certainly is. And, I was actually asked to give a, like, kind of talk about this in November at this, like, festival about the influence of the internet and of AI. So it's something I've been thinking quite a bit about. And I don't know, I really think that, again, for me, it does come out of a spiritual battle that's taking place. And the use of AI, I mean, I have such mixed feelings, for this conference that I'm doing where I'm supposed to talk about the influence of AI. The organizer reached out to me and he asked me, can you give me a little bit of an outline of the things that you might touch on? We want to put something up on the website in terms of what, can you give me like a few bullet points? At least that's what my impression was. So I did. I wrote like 7 bullet points of like topic headings that I thought I would hit. And I sent them to him and he said, oh, actually, we really want it to be like a paragraph. And he took the liberty of putting in my 7 bullet points into his AI assistant. And he's like, what do you think of this? And honestly, it was definitely better than I could have done on my own. And it just took my 7 bullet points and wrote it into a paragraph. And I did sign off on it. And he did make a point of like putting a note that it was done by AI. But it was a weird moment for me. It was the first time because I don't have an account. I am not using it at all. Because I really feel like I don't know. I distrust it on a lot of levels. I think there's a lot of reason to distrust it. The kind of the pretense of how much easier it's going to make our lives. I don't I don't trust it. I just was listening to a story about how all of these lawyers were using AI to prepare their legal briefs, and the AI made up all of these like fictitious case sightings that didn't exist. And the lawyers didn't catch it and they submitted it to the judges. And if a human being had done this, if a human being had falsified and created fictitious case settings to cite in legal cases, it would be illegal. It would be, you were lying. You would be prosecuted for that. But when the AI does it, they called it hallucinations, AI hallucinations. And I just don't think everybody realizes what it's leading towards, because I really do think that it's leading towards like a kind of digital prison, that there's going to be central bank digital currencies and AI controlling large functions. And I don't know, and they're putting chips in people's brains, and I mean I'm going to weird places, but I really do think that the AI isn't just this innocent digital tool like we used to use Photoshop. You know what I mean? It's something else.
Uh-huh.
And if you listen to or read what the people who have created AI say about it, it's totally, they talk about opening portals and other dimensions and different beings. Like they talk about it in totally mystical terms, not in these like practical, technical terms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I try to be practical. My daughter does use it for studying, and I gotta say, she sometimes uses it in ways that I think is an intelligent use of it. She's making use of it, but I have conversations with her all the time about the digital tools that she's using, and I'm trying to like instill in her what I think of as digital literacy. There's a great book by Douglas Rushkoff called Programmed or Be Programmed. And so if like you don't understand what you're engaging with, like if you don't understand the nature of these devices and the algorithms that are running the social media feeds, then you are inherently going to be subject to them. And even when you do, even me who is digitally literate is still subject to them. So it's an uphill battle, but one that I think is worth fighting.
Hmm. Okay, I'm going to come clean with you and share with you how I use AI, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
Okay.
Okay, so and it pertains to the next line of questions I want to talk to you about, and that pertains to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So there's hundreds and thousands of different translations of those 195, some say 196 sutras, and they all have their different interpretations of what these small like phrases say. Um, so I've been really delving deep into the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali the last 5 years or so, ever since the pandemic, when was practicing a lot online with one of my yoga teachers, Ryan Lear, from One Yoga. He's a global ambassador for Lululemon. He's very big into the yoga well beyond the physical poses, which I think is so important. And so as I try to understand, I have a whole shelf of just maybe like there's 25, 30 different um, translations. But I'm using AI just to kind of tell me about this sutra, or how does it relate to Christianity, or how does it relate to this, to just like to a householder. So for the people I talk to, like how can I relate this concept to a householder, or how can I relate this sutra to Christianity, and just to kind of as a starting place to kind of get me started. Um, that's the only way that I've been using AI. But what are your thoughts on that? And then let's delve into your understanding of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and what you've learned from that.
I mean, in terms of your usage of AI, I mean, I don't have any issues with that. I know other people who would use it similarly. If I was to just, play devil's advocate, I would say that, by doing that, by asking AI to collate, and I'm sure it probably does a pretty good job. You'd have to know that the information that you're getting might not be totally accurate. You'd want to kind of check it if you were going to be using it to state facts. But as your own personal inquiry into ideas and being able to communicate ideas with other people, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. However, I know yoga teachers who are using AI to help them come up with sequences. And honestly, you can train AIs to do a pretty darn good job of that. And I just think that if you didn't have AI to do that, what would you do? You would read the text, you would talk with other people about the text, you would have other ways to try to come to what you want to understand without having the ideas fed to you in the same way that AI is. I
Absolutely,
don't
and I still do, and I still do those things.
I'm sure you do. I'm not saying you don't, but that's what I see as different. Like if you don't
Yeah.
also spend that self-reflective time with it, if you just take what the AI tells you as face value and don't consider it through the lens of your personal practice and experience and other ways of processing information, then I don't then it just becomes more of like an academic pursuit, which would bring me to your question about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, because you have to be really specific. Like you said, there's all these different translations. So, the most classical and probably the sort of translation of Patanjali Sutra that the majority of people within the yoga world embrace, or at least those from a more academic viewpoint, is really not what people learn about yoga. It basically teaches like a transcendence beyond this worldly plane of suffering. It teaches a somewhat dualistic frame for basically, as Georg Forstein once wrote, like the dissolution of everything that is considered typically human. Like the goal is to reach a super consciousness where you become beyond it. Now, there are other translations, like the Desikachar translation of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is not that. It's a much more integrative understanding about bringing you into your life, not trying to transcend it. But it really kind of depends. Like the sutras themselves, those aphorisms are very terse. Like they're just content headings. Like some people talk about the commentary also being part of it, but in terms of the sutras themselves, they're so open to wide interpretation. I think for me, I've certainly got a lot of value out of engaging with Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. I feel like so much of like the basic concepts of being truthful, and even as we were talking about earlier about making your efforts but then relinquishing the results of those efforts, and then ultimately of, I think, some relationship to higher power or God. All of those things are super important.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Let's talk. Like, I'm about to ask you of some of your sutras that are most profound for you. But first, I'd just like to share with you mine
Mm.
and your interpretations on them. One I think that is very important in today's world is Yoga Sutra 133, the four attitudes to cultivate a clear, calm mind in relation to the four types of people we meet: the people that are happy, the virtuous, the suffering, and the wrongdoers. I think that's a great framework to approach everyone we meet. So yeah, what are your reflections on 133, where they say to the happy people we meet them with a friendliness, to the suffering, compassion, to the virtuous, joy, delight, celebrate with them because what's happening for them is happening for them, not for you. So it's happy for them, and then the wrongdoers, equanimity, impartiality, indifference.
I mean, I think that those are all very universal aspects of like humanity. I feel that there's certain just basic truths, like in the same way that we might all agree that murder was wrong or something, that, or like love is all powerful, that there's certain very fundamental universal things that run through. And I think that's what's amazing about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, in that it clearly is some articulation of things that you can observe in your own experience. In fact, I think that's the way that you know them to be true, because they can be observed in your own experience. You can observe that attitude that you described in that sutra of meeting those different sorts of people in those different sorts of ways is of profound benefit for you and for others. So it's I think it's obvious if one observes what happens. As you said, if you have an awareness of your experience and you decide, oh, I want to feel well and I want to be a good person, then these things become self-evident.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. And test subject number one is yourself. So I feel like these attitudes of friendliness, of delight, of joy, of compassion, of equanimity starts with the self on the yoga mat, because like at least me, I incorporate all these selves in myself, in my personal practice on the mat and beyond. And so um, how can we cultivate these attitudes with others if we can't even cultivate them on ourselves?
I think you would have to cultivate them with yourself before you would be in any kind of position to facilitate it in others.
Absolutely, absolutely. The other sutra I just really like, and I think it's so important and that's something I try to teach in all my classes. Is three of them, and I'm sure you know the three: Yoga Sutra 246, 247, and 248. The only sutras out of all of Patanjali's that have anything to do with postures, and maybe they're not even about postures; they're sitting postures for meditation.
Mm.
But I try to remind people in their physical yoga practice, like, stop trying so hard. If your nervous system is completely dysregulated, you're fully in the sympathetic, but oh, you're in a deep chair, like,
Mm.
no one's winning here except maybe your ego.
Mm.
So it's stabilize your postures, find ease, comforts, relaxation, and then use that to transcend into a sense of effortlessness, a pathway to deep peace, a connection with that divine, with that higher, that highest self that is in you.
Mm.
And then I guess 248, what I'm still trying to understand, is then we transcend dualities where there's no good posture, no bad posture, no hot, no cold. Everything just is, and we're just observing what is non-attached.
Mm. Well, I don't know about that translation of
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
sutra.
yeah.
I
That's why I
mean,
want to
I would
hear.
say in terms of what Patanjali says about asana practice or doing postures, I mean, primarily what it communicates is that it would have sthira sukha.
Yeah.
And understanding the concept of sthira sukha is something I've spent quite a bit of time. It is sort of taught, I guess, maybe in different ways and understood differently in different schools. In the Desikachar tradition, it's very specific and very connected to certain ideas about breath pattern as well, where sthira is, a strength from below and it sometimes associates with exhale and maybe even like a giving of breath. And then sukha is a from above, it's a receiving breath. It's the easefulness and receptivity. And so there's a balanced effort that is struck between the effort and the non-effort, as you said, like effortlessness, and I think that having an experience of that in your breath and your body is a precedence for understanding the other things that you pointed to in terms of those attitudes and actions that one might behold. It's the like you said, it's the microcosm of it. You experience sthira sukha in your own system, in your breathing and moving practice, and that becomes the basis for it to be expressed in your attitudes and actions.
Hmm.
In terms of the ending of dualities,
Yeah.
you get into some touchy areas there. Like I've really, we started this conversation talking about Jesus and ideas about reincarnation and ending dualities. I think there's some truth there. I don't think that there's not anything true there in terms of what it is, but that knowledge of duality and non-duality, I'm just very careful now of recognizing that I don't I don't know. I don't know if I need to transcend dualities. I don't know if I need to try to do anything to transcend dualities. I think God transcends dualities. And like I said, I want to serve God. But sometimes within the yoga world, some of the efforting to transcend or some of the ideas of duality and non duality get into touchy areas. And I think the thing that makes it touchy or not is whether or not there is belief in a creator God. Because if there's not a
Hmm.
belief in a creator God, ending dualities means you're God. And I'm just really distrustful of anything that makes human beings into God.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I don't think that's
I
what you were trying. I don't think that's what you were saying, but I
yeah.
feel like sort of I have all this like prickliness around ideas of duality and non-duality now because they're talked about in ways in the yoga world that I think are potentially reckless. I spent a fair amount of time meditating myself into different states and tapping into different realms and had all kinds of experiences. And at some point, I got a really clear message. I didn't recognize it as a message from God at that time. Now, looking back in retrospect, I think it is. And I was just told really clearly to stop doing that, that this is not for you to be doing. I didn't know what I was trying to open myself up to the unknown and to different beings, and I didn't know what I was opening up to. And I think it was really reckless and potentially destructive. So sometimes these days I'm very careful when it comes to talking about meditation or reaching different states of consciousness. I want it to be situated in a way where we're clear about where we are, like we said, in life, you know?
No, I appreciate that, and I just thank you for just listening to me. And I'm just trying my best to take this teaching, this knowledge, and I don't know, it all comes from a good place. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I don't know. The more I know, the absolute less I know. But that's exciting to me because it gives me opportunity just to keep on learning. And I think those make, like I heard, the best teachers are senior students.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I try to always remember is just always be a student and do so with humility and be okay with making mistakes. We're gonna make them, and it's okay.
Well, I would say that's actually what I would consider to be an evolution of the role of yoga teacher, because in the early days you had yoga masters and like guru disciple relationships. But now we're so many generations removed, many of those gurus fell from grace in tragedies because of abusive behaviors. And so, new generations of yoga teachers like yourself and me, I think for us, what you just articulated, which I've often called sort of like a more radical transparency, where you're just really clear about, like, this is where I got this from, this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I'm working with, but you're not situating yourself as an authority. You're inquiring, you're interested to learn from other people, you're willing to admit when you're wrong, and you're sharing of yourself. You're not keeping the secret of who you are and just having it be the teachings, not the teacher. And that kind of more open and, again, more transparent relationship is, I think, how teachers have been able to like be authentic and not fall into some of the same pitfalls that other teachers fell into in other generations.
hmm I think it's really important to allow yourself to make mistakes, because from these mistakes we could learn and we could grow. Where is an example of somewhere in your life or your teaching or your personal life where you made a mistake, and what were your learnings from that mistake?
Well, I think that I mean, I don't know if I like to reframe it as mistakes, but I would say that I was misguided.
Okay, yeah.
And I think primarily there's been something really good. Like, I feel like I have been guided by God in my yoga teaching, even before I knew that's what it was. I think that for a time, I just got caught up in the physicalities like a lot of people did. So the overemphasis on the physical forms and on alignment per se, I think in some regards, I'll give you a for instance, my wife, I met my wife in my yoga class, oh gosh, 30 years ago, a long time ago. And she hadn't been in my class for like over a decade since we had kids and stuff. And then I opened the center 7, 8 months ago, and she started coming to my class again. And she was doing all of the poses in the way that I used to teach it, like way back when, which was much more focused like on straight lines and kind of like this idea of geometry in the poses and alignment. And I was breaking from some of the Iyengar alignments and making them more like personalized. Like, there wasn't one right alignment, like you were allowed to change it, which I do think was different. But still, the focus was so much on alignment that it was taking away from what I focus on now, which is more experience that someone's having. So by having it be less about trying to like get your body into a shape, it leaves room for it to be more about the awareness that you spoke about before. So I feel like that's kind of the area where things have changed most for me. Is now I want everything to be rounded, and I'm not looking for straight lines anymore, or suggesting to other people that they would.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. That's interesting. That's interesting how, our practice change and grow. Like you started with Ashtanga yoga. It was very physical, power vinyasa, and then you moved to Iyengar, which was alignment based, and then you traveled to India, and then you started like a more therapeutic orientation, focused on the breath, inspired by Dekeshar and Krishnamacharya. Um, what does your current practice look like? Your personal practice?
I mean, my personal practice is what I teach. So the same forms that I teach in all of my classes are the forms that I use in my own personal practice. I would say also that, as I discussed with the people in my teacher training recently, I think that personal practice doesn't always mean doing breathing and moving exercises. I think that, especially because I've been teaching so many yoga classes over the years, like the role of asana for me, it's less important than it used to be in my personal practice. I used to do, extensive asana practice every day, and as part of my personal practice, but nowadays a lot of my personal practice is more like forest walking and bird watching and stuff. Like it's taken other forms. I still do breathing and moving practices, but my practice is taking a lot of different forms these days. And in terms of the breathing and moving, what I practice is what I teach.
What about your self-study? You've studied the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. You're currently studying the Bible. What are some other sacred texts that has helped you on your journey in the past and in the present?
Well, I mean, because I've identified as a yoga teacher and considered it my profession for my whole adult life, I have spent a lot of time and take on the task of wanting to know like what are all the source texts. So whether it's Vedas or Samkhya or the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, or the Sutras, or Vedanta, or the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, I've tried to make myself like aware and understanding what these texts are and what they're saying to some degree. I'm not an academic, so I can't translate Sanskrit. But as you mentioned, I have had this podcast for the last 10 years, and that has really been where I've done my continuing education because I've literally been able to have the smartest people on the planet on all of these subjects
Yeah.
on my show and like just learn from them and ask questions and sometimes even test like if I really know what I'm talking about or not, like get somebody on and say, this is what I think, like just like you said to me, like what do you think of that, and like have them say, just that has all been learning for me.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of my ongoing education, I continue to explore yoga. And a lot of it these days is like how it's being shared. And like sometimes I am a little focused on the industry because that's a lot of what I'm having to deal with. But I do always come back again and again to what are the philosophical underpinnings and what role it's playing in the world. And in terms of, you know, my exploration of the Bible, I think I haven't been speaking about it as much publicly, but it has been really fruitful and eye-opening. And I've actually been looking at, delving into it more on this show in a way that would be appropriate. So we'll see.
Uh-huh.
Hopefully, I'll get some folks on. We'll talk about it more.
Beautiful, beautiful. So almost 500 episodes of your podcast. Throughout all these guests that you've talked to, some of the smartest people in the field, what is the one, or maybe it's two, or maybe it's a couple? What are the common threads amongst all these guests?
Yeah, I'd say that there's this common thread of where somebody has an experience with yoga that for some reason just like makes it become part of like who they are and what they care about. Sometimes there's like early childhood experiences that people have, but often, people talk about, I was in the shavasana in that first yoga class and I cried and I didn't know why or whatever. Or somebody has like what you might call a transformative experience with yoga, and it just becomes something that they want to engage with and know about. And often it leads to different experiences that are shared, whether it's pushing your body too hard or coming to understand the importance of breath or getting interested in the sutras and yamas and niyamas, that there's these very common things. So people who are of different ages than me and different cultures than me, I can totally connect with them on yoga in a way that's very unique to yoga. Like there's not a lot of things that can transcend cultures and time in the same way that yoga does.
Hmm. I'm sure you've learned so much from these conversations. Um, but now I want to learn, and like major takeaways, but I want to learn yours. Through all the highs and lows that has been your hero's journey, what would you say has been the greatest life lesson you've learned on your path, Shay, that you feel called in this moment to share with us?
Wow. Greatest life lesson. I guess greatest life lesson right now would be I got to give it up to Jesus. I got to give it up to Jesus. I feel like the greatest life lesson that I have right now is understanding that Jesus was real and understanding that there's a spiritual battle going on, and I want to be aligned with the side of Jesus and God. That's the most important life lesson that I've learned, because that's the one that is helping me be in the world that we're in right now. More so
Hmm.
than ideas of non-duality and duality that I learned in yoga and Patanjali's sutras. Understanding the message of Jesus, I think, is perhaps one of the most important, profound lesson at this moment for sure.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And one of the last questions I ask most guests on every podcast, every episode. And I have one final question I want to ask you. I have so many more questions on my list here, and
I'll
maybe
come
we get
back.
to.
If you want to have me
Yeah,
back again, I'll come back.
yeah. I'd love to have you. This has been such a fun conversation. So we've explored your past, we've explored your present, and I'd like to hit fast forward and venture into your future just for fun. And we're gonna go alongside an 85-year-old Jay Brown. Who is that 85-year-old man? Where are you? Who you surrounded by? What is the legacy you've left in your 85 years? And I think most importantly, what are the predominant feelings in your being?
Wow. I don't know if I have an answer to that question. And that's very rare, Derek. I'm somebody who normally has an answer for whatever question, but I don't. I mean, I think I have an idea that I would be with my wife and my children nearby, hopefully. Uh, I don't know what. I don't know. I think I'm the same person then than I am now. I don't think I'm any different. I think in terms of feelings, I guess I would hope that, I don't know, that maybe there would be a little bit more contentment. I still struggle, as I'm sure most of us do these days. I'm hoping there would be a continued direction towards being at peace and feeling in touch with God. That's what I would hope for. That whatever direction I'm on now, which I do feel is the right direction, will continue and just come to further fruition. So when I'm 85, I'll just be more settled and it'll be more integrated, and I won't maybe be struggling less than I feel like I still do now sometimes.
All right, well, I just want to invite you to close your eyes and connect with your breath just for a moment, as I know you know how to do. And I just want you to step into that 85-year-old man. You're surrounded by your wife, your children, you're content, you're in a continued direction towards peace, you're connected to God, and you've done great things in your life. You've made your mom proud, no doubt. And then I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back to current day Jay Brown. And that 85-year-old man, he whispers in your ear a message. What does he share with you?
You're doing okay. Keep at it.
I think that's great advice for us all. Thank you so much, Jay. It's been a real honor, really pleasure. I've been listening to your podcast, and now I've got to sit down with you and break bread, have a great conversation. And I really learned a lot, and I feel super inspired, and I'm sure people tuning in will as well. For people wanting to connect with you, they can find you on your website, jbrownyoga.com. You're on Instagram, jbrownyoga. And if they're in Easton, Pennsylvania, they can visit your yoga studio, your small yoga studio. Only 8 people
Yep.
max, maybe 10 with no teacher there,
Yep.
no teacher's mat.
Yes.
Um, but they can connect with you there, thebirdhouseyoga.com if in Pennsylvania. Any last closing words?
No, just thank you, Derek. It's really been a pleasure. I've enjoyed this conversation. It felt very real and raw. Like I said, there's things in this that I haven't really been talking much about, but I'm really happy to be doing that. So thank you for reaching out and having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you showing up so fully and authentically. Um, it's been an honor. Like I said, that's the word that just keeps on coming to my spirit, but words are just words. There's a real feeling of appreciation and gratitude. And those are the best words I could use to describe what I'm feeling. To close every episode, we bring our fist in for a digital fist bump. Boom. Thank
Boom.
you.
You're
A
welcome.
choice to step into the winner circle, and maybe next time we could discuss what being a winner means to you. But
Cool.
thank you so much, Jay. Wishing you a beautiful evening.
You too, Derek. Take care.
Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers.